Before we dive in, I want to extend a heartfelt apology in advance for any mispronunciation of names throughout this video. I'm putting in my utmost effort to get each pronunciation right. Now, without further ado, let's jump right in. In the late 1980s, amidst the digital frenzy of the video game industry landscape of the time, a Japanese company named Square Company stood on the brink of collapse. It was within this context of desperation and dwindling hope that Final Fantasy was conceived, not just as another game, but as a last-ditch effort to save the company. The stakes could not have been higher, and the title itself reflected the dire circumstances under which it was developed. It was to be Square's Final Fantasy, a project that encapsulated both the dream of success and the looming shadow of failure. Hironobu Sakaguchi, the mastermind behind the project, envisioned a game that would diverge from the fast-paced arcade-style games that were popular at the time. Instead, he aimed to create a rich, immersive experience that combined narrative depth with strategic gameplay, a concept inspired by Western role-playing games, RPGs, but infused with the unique storytelling and artistic sensibilities of Japanese game design. This vision was bold and untested in a market that favored simplicity and instant gratification over complex storylines and character development. The team at Square was small, resources were scarce, and the hardware of the era imposed strict limitations on what could be achieved. Despite these obstacles, Sakaguchi and his team were driven by a singular mission: to create a game that offered an unparalleled adventure, one that would transport players to another world where they could experience epic quests and engage in tactical battles and explore vast mystical landscapes. This narrative of Final Fantasy drew from a plethora of influences, from mythology and classical fantasy literature to contemporary science fiction and fantasy films. This eclectic mix of inspirations was brought together to craft a story that was both familiar and entirely new. The game introduced players to a fantastical universe inhabited by a rich cast of characters, each with their own backstory, motivations, and destinies. Players would embark on a quest not to just save the game's world from destruction, but to become part of a narrative that explored themes of heroism, sacrifice, and the struggle between light and darkness. Final Fantasy's gameplay mechanics also represented a departure from the norm. The game introduced a turn-based combat system that required strategic thinking and careful planning, a stark contrast to the reflex-driven action of arcade games. This system, combined with a complex magic system and character progression that depended on the player's choices, offered a level of depth and customization that was groundbreaking at the time. The creation of Final Fantasy was a gamble, a project born out of necessity and fueled by a passion for storytelling and game design. It was an endeavor that sought to push the boundaries of what video games could be, to prove that they could be more than mere entertainment. They could be an art form capable of telling complex, engaging stories. As we delve deeper into the history of this iconic game, we'll explore how its development challenged the conventions of the time, the impact it had upon its release, and the legacy it has built over the years. A legacy that has transformed a company's Final Fantasy into a global phenomenon that has captivated millions of players around the world. The development of Final Fantasy was a journey fraught with obstacles. From the technical limitations of the hardware to the internal doubts about the game's commercial viability, Square was betting on a project that diverged significantly from the prevailing trends of the video game industry. In the late 1980s, the hardware capabilities of gaming consoles were modest at best. The team aimed to create a vast, explorable world filled with detailed sprites, intricate maps, and engaging combat system, all within the constraints of an 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment System. The technical limitations included restricted memory, which limited the size of the game world, the complexity of the graphics, and the depth of the game mechanics. To overcome these challenges, the development team employed clever programming techniques and optimizations. They developed a unique tile-based system for creating expansive maps that could be rendered efficiently by the NES hardware. This approach allowed for a variety of landscapes and dungeons to be depicted, giving players a sense of a vast, explorable world within the technical constraints. The design of Final Fantasy's gameplay and narrative was another area where the team faced significant challenges. Sakaguchi wanted a game to have a deep story that would engage players on an emotional level, something relatively unheard of in console games at the time. Crafting a compelling narrative within the limitations of the NES, with its tech display capabilities, required a careful balance of visual storytelling and concise dialogue. The solution was to create a rich backstory and world lore that could be hinted at through the game's environments, item descriptions, and character interactions. This approach allowed the games to convey a complex narrative without relying heavily on text, engaging players' imaginations to fill the gaps. Nobuo Uematsu, the composer for Final Fantasy, faced the challenge of creating an emotionally resonant soundtrack within the NES's basic audio capabilities. Uematsu composed a score that not only enhanced the game's atmosphere, but also conveyed the emotions of the story and characters, all within the constraints of the hardware's limited sound channels. Uematsu's work on Final Fantasy demonstrated the potential of video game music to contribute to the storytelling experience, setting a new standard for the role of music in games. His compositions, including the iconic main theme, will become some of the most recognizable and beloved pieces of video game music in history. Finally, Square faced the challenge of marketing a game that was radically different from the arcade hits and the action-packed titles that dominated the market. There was skepticism about the appeal of a story-driven turn-based RPG to a wider audience. The marketing team decided to emphasize the game's unique aspects, its epic story, deep gameplay mechanics, and the promise of a new kind of gaming experience. When Final Fantasy was released, it defied expectations, garnering critical acclaim and commercial success. Players were captivated by its engaging story, strategic gameplay, and the depth of its world. The game's success proved that there was a market for RPGs outside of Japan, paving the way for the genre's popularity worldwide. The development of Final Fantasy was a testament to the creativity and perseverance of Sakaguchi and his team. They not only overcame significant technical and creative challenges, but they also succeeded in creating a game that would leave an indelible mark on the gaming industry. The innovative solutions they developed laid the groundwork for future advancements in game design and storytelling, contributing to the evolution of the RPG genre. The title Final Fantasy carries with it a story as captivating as the game itself. It wasn't merely a creative choice, but a reflection of the circumstances surrounding the game's development and the existential crisis facing Square at the time. This section explores the significance of the game's name and the lore that surrounds its selection, and how it symbolizes the game's impact on the gaming industry and Square's fate. The lore behind the name Final Fantasy is a mixture of fact and company legend. As widely recounted, Square was on the verge of bankruptcy, and this game was seen as its last attempt at success, a literal Final Fantasy. Hironobu Sakaguchi, who was considering leaving the industry if the game failed, played a significant role in naming the game. He saw it as potentially his final project in the game development, hence the name. However, there's also a practical aspect of the choice of the name. The team wanted a title that could be abbreviated to FF in Roman script, which would sound appealing and be easily pronounced if in Japanese. Final Fantasy met this criterion perfectly, encapsulating the dire circumstances of its creation and the hope for a breakthrough. The name Final Fantasy became symbolic of the game's success against all odds. What was intended to be a swan song for Square turned into the opening chapter of one of the most enduring and beloved franchises in video game history. The irony of the situation is not lost on fans and industry observers. The final game laid the foundation for a series that has spanned decades, with numerous sequels, spin-offs, and multimedia adaptations. This turnaround story is a testament to the game's quality, the team's creativity, and the appetite for a rich, narrative-driven experience among gamers. Final Fantasy symbolizes not just the end of hardship for Square, but also the enduring appeal of stories well told and worlds well crafted. It stands as a beacon of hope and resilience, illustrating how close encounters with failure can precede significant achievements. Again, the name Final Fantasy has become synonymous with excellence in storytelling, innovation in gameplay, and the ability to evoke deep emotional responses from players. It represents a franchise that has continually pushed the boundaries of the RPG genre and video gaming as a medium. The series has explored a wide array of themes, settings, and characters, each installment offering a unique experience while maintaining the core elements that fans have come to love. The franchise's unique ability to reinvent itself while staying true to its roots is also a key factor in its longevity and ongoing success. The release of the Final Fantasy in 1987 marked the beginning of a new era in the gaming industry. Its success not only saved Square from bankruptcy, but also established a new standard for role-playing games. This section explores the broad impact of Final Fantasy on the gaming industry, its role in popularizing RPGs globally, and the evolution it spurred within the video game narrative and design. Final Fantasy played a crucial role in popularizing Japanese RPGs in the global market. Prior to its success, JRPGs were largely unknown outside of Japan, with few titles available in the West. The international release of Final Fantasy, localized for Western audiences, opened the door for other JRPGs to find global audiences. This cross-culture exchange, enriched in the global gaming landscape, introduced players to the unique storytelling styles, aesthetics, and game design philosophies of Japanese developers. As the series progressed, each installment of Final Fantasy continued to push the boundaries of what was possible in video game design and technology. From the introduction of real-time battles in Final Fantasy IV to the seamless integration of cinematic storytelling in Final Fantasy VII, the series has been a trailblazer in adopting and refining new technologies. This use of full-motion video, voice acting, and 3D graphics in later titles expanded the expressive capabilities of video games, setting new benchmarks for production value and narrative depth. The legacy of Final Fantasy is a testament to the game's innovation, creativity, and impact. It transformed Square from a company on the brink of failure to a leading force in the game industry. More importantly, it showed the world that video games could be more than just entertainment. They could be immersive, emotional experiences that rival any other storytelling medium. As the series continues to evolve, its foundational principles, deep storytelling, richly developed characters, and innovative gameplay remain a beacon for the industry, inspiring future generations of developers and gamers alike. Thanks for watching, and if you made it this far and enjoyed this video, why not subscribe and hit the bell to stay up to date with all of our content. And feel free to click on one of the videos on the screen now to join us on more adventures through the tech timeline.